At Cabana, we understand the struggles of working in healthcare. Whether it's loss, coworker challenges, or trouble balancing work and home, we're here. And so are 85,000 peers from hospitals and health systems all across the country. Connect with others who have been there. Join our live, daily group classes for support and growth. Because finding someone who gets what you're going through shouldn't be its own struggle. Learn more at www.mycabana.health.
Welcome back to You're Always Fine, a space to show up for yourself and embrace the mess that lives underneath because, let's be real, it's exhausting always being fine. So grab your headphones and allow yourself to listen, laugh, and even cry because you are not alone and we aren't always fine. And that's okay.
We are back with another episode of You're Always Fine, and I have a special surprise for you guys. Today, I'm your host, Christine.
And I'm Busy.
That's right. We have our producer, Busy, behind the mic today to talk about friendship breakups. Okay, so just to ground us all, a friendship breakup, when you're friends with someone at different varying levels and you either drift apart or you fall apart, you have a disagreement, something happens, a betrayal, and you kind of think about it from kindergarten all the way through like your adult life. This is kind of constantly happening, but we don't always process it.
Yeah, I think, looking back at, like you said, starting kindergarten throughout an adult life, you have those friendships, some that just kind of drift apart naturally. Life happens, you guys are busy, people move away, you're on sort of separate life paths, or your habits and passions don't align anymore. Or, I remember a time I had a pretty big falling out with one of my best friends in college, and we didn't talk for months. And eventually we found each other and came back together and are still friends. But, you have these times where you just have these falling outs and you're not really sure what to do or how to cope, because it is different than a relationship. It's more complex and more nuanced. But I think you're right. It goes throughout your whole life.
Well, and it's interesting, right? When we think about the concept of friendships, why is it so hard for adults to find new friends? It's usually because all of our friendships are kind of forced situations a little bit, right? Your kindergarten class, right? And then if you're not in the same kindergarten, first grade class as you were with someone you were friends with in kindergarten, that just evolves and changes, right? And so on and so forth. And, even when we get to college, right? Freshmen, why is transferring so hard for people, right? Most of the time, because freshman year, you're all in that anxious state of, wanting to meet new friends. You all have the same goal. You're kind of thrown together and forced a little bit to be friends. And then at work is usually like the next big pool that you meet your friends. And so it's very interesting when we think about, how much we change over a lifetime and how these people who have had such significant impacts on us can just essentially drift away, right? You talked about a fallout and coming back together, which I think is definitely one way. But for me, it's always just the quiet exit that I'm like, how did it get here? How did our, something we've had since, the second grade, we're 35 now, how did we get to a place where I literally send you just a happy birthday text on your birthday, just happy birthday. No nuance to it.
Definitely. I mean, I have experience with that as well. It's one of, I would say, the weirdest ways. You're so close with somebody. They were one of your best friends, your roommates, your everything. And then all of a sudden, like you said, when that situational kind of glue falls apart and they move away and you move away and you kind of start your career paths, it's what's holding us together anymore. And unfortunately, sometimes what you had isn't enough. And then it's just kind of those text window. It is the happy birthday. And then the weirdest thing is when that happy birthday text doesn't come.
Then you're oddly mad. You're oddly mad about the guy's happy birthday text not coming.
Yes.
Or, I know for myself too, it's with one of my oldest friends, we're in that stage. And every year it's I don't want to send it.
Right.
Her birthday comes before mine. And I'm let's just, not in a bad way, let's just cut it off. We don't need that, you know what I mean? But then it's if I send it, it's then you're you know what I mean? It's
right,
this string. And I'm someone who often has been the glue in a friendship, or, I'm the one that's constantly reaching out. I'm the one that's constantly putting in that effort. And as I become more of an adult, I realize that, I want more of a balance in this.
Mm-hmm.
And
definitely,
just like any relationship, friendships are hard work. They're effort. They're, they're picking up and showing up and all those things. And, how, when I really like examine how we got to just this one happy birthday text, it was because I felt that unless I engaged the conversation, I was not getting any engagement back. Or then when I did say, you know what, I'm going to suck it up. I'm going to how are things? Right. And then it's good, period. You don't want a connection. To me, I'm that's not a relationship that I really want. Time doesn't, or just because we were in each other's lives for a period of time or an era, if you will, I can be at peace with that, as opposed to dragging things into here just to say that we're quote unquote on good terms or whatever have you. I don't know. I think it's very interesting.
Definitely. I think I've also been in a similar situation where eventually I got to the point where I kind of almost did an experiment in a way. I was I'm going to stop reaching out. I'm the person that always is reaching out or making the plans or checking in, and this other individual does not. And you know what? I'm going to see what happens when I stop. And I think a super, super big catalyst to that was COVID. You really had to make that effort to maintain, especially long distance friendships, because you couldn't see each other in any capacity. You couldn't go outside with them. You really couldn't do much. So it was just, how are you going to show up for me right now when I'm showing up for you? And unfortunately, sometimes it's not returned, and you have to either say, hey, I'm okay with not reaching out, or have that bigger conversation. What's going on? Is there something else happening? But I think it's totally a similar situation where you can't always be the person reaching out, because it takes an emotional toll on you as well.
Yes. And it's so funny because I don't know if I ever in my head thought it was an experiment or whatever, but I too had several situations where it's well, if I don't do this, what happens, right? What does that communication look like? And, even if I serve that in different areas of my life, if I don't serve it in this one, what? And I don't know why it always feels surprising, because it's if I'm doing this, I pretty much know the answer, right? But it feels so surprising when, what we know, I think, is gone, which is the actual friendship and connection. When we know it's gone, but I guess maybe it's the Hail Mary, maybe it's the just want to check, maybe it's just me kind of thing.
Yes. And I think it's that you get to the point when you feel that and you're let me just try one last time. And then it's kind of that nail in the coffin, it's there. You were kind of hoping it never would be, but I feel at that point, you can't really deny it anymore or defend. So you are hitting that stop where it's all right, something, either this is unfortunately done or something needs to change.
And I think to that change point, it's really interesting because, at least in my experience, because of the role I played in my friendship groups, it's it's something going on. When you go for that change or you try to reestablish that, it's it almost means what are you talking about? Everything's fine. Because it's I'm changing my behavior and I'm asking for more. And so there's nothing wrong. They're just well, you're not reaching out to me. Right. And it's that expectation that you're going to do because you've always done. And then when you try to recalibrate that expectation, it can be really difficult. I mean, it's really difficult in, spousal relationships where you don't have to worry, you live under the same house, or you know what I mean? That investment. And so, I mean, shoot, it's really hard for parents to reset their expectation for their kids.
Absolutely.
So, I think too, that's a tricky place to be in when you're because sometimes it's you care about the friendship, you bring it to their attention, but it's almost you're met with what are you talking about?
A resistance.
Yeah, what
definitely.
are you talking about? This is nothing's wrong, or, why are you needing more from me than before?
Right. And I think a big part, especially in my life, kind of like you said, the glue analogy, you were that glue in that friend group. I feel sometimes I was the opposite. I would be in big friend groups with 7, 10 people, 5 girls, something like that. And a lot of people just could not understand that, you're just closer with certain people in life and you don't have to be best friends with everybody in the friend group. So that would rub people the wrong way, that I would want to spend time individually with other people or in smaller settings, and this would upset the other 5 people. And it's just, they couldn't comprehend that you're not best friends with everybody in the big friend group. That's not life. That's not how it is. You're not best friends with everybody in your class. You're not best friends with everybody in your neighborhood. You have those individuals. And kind of like that, when I wasn't showing up for them, like I was showing up for other people, they couldn't look at themselves either and be like, I don't even want to be close with you either. I'm not showing up for you either. So it was like that weird dynamic. And I think that's even how you get with one-on-one friendships. Like, if you're still showing up for them and they're not showing up for you, and then you give them the same behavior back, it's like, what's
they're
going
resistant
on?
to it. Exactly. When they're met with their own behavior, it's no longer okay, And I 100% agree. It's really is crazy. I mean, I think that's kind of why we talk about, really doing that inner work and understanding your internal narrative so that you can have those conversations, to know what you bring to the table, right? Like, to know that, like, I know I can only, like, from doing the work, I can only really have a small group of friends because of the way I invest. And I need to be very selective about how I invest in friendships, because I know that I can give and give and give. And in order to make it so that, it doesn't end pretty much how all my friendships have ended, which is my classic, just like Hermione, when she, it does the spell to like, so her parents never remember her. Like, that's like,
yes,
when I'm uncomfortable, we're not gonna have a big blow up or anything. I'm going to like slowly try to disappear from your life. And then most of the time that leaves people being like, what the actual hell just happened? But it's because I felt in another way that when I tried to show you I needed something, it wasn't there. But it really speaks to, right, this internal turmoil that I think happens after the breakup, or in the middle of the breakup, or when you're just kind of reminiscing about, seeing an old picture, and all of a sudden all the feelings come back, like, hasn't been enough time. Should I reach out to them? If I reach out to them with this memory, like, what? And, I struggle with this all the time. What do I want out of it? Like, I struggle because I'm like, oh my God, I want them to know that in this very moment, I'm thinking of them in a very fond way. But then it's also like, well, if you don't want to rekindle the friendship and you don't want to be anxious about whether they're going to respond, like how it ended, I don't know. What do you think?
I mean, absolutely. I think it's one of those things, especially with social media, where you have those reminders of memories. On this day, 6 years ago, you were doing this with that person, and it pops up. And like you said, a lot of the times it doesn't have to be a negative feeling or, a remorseful or regretful even. It can just be that, like, in this moment we had these great memories, and just because we're not close anymore doesn't negate that what we had was so fun and great, and you were a great friend in the moment and kind of what I needed. But it is that weird, like, okay, do I want to send it to them? Do I want to reopen that? Either it could be a wound, or it could just be like a little window. Do I want to just kind of peek back into their life? I think like another big thing is when they post something major, like a kid, a marriage, an engagement, or something you hear through the grapevine, or something like somebody died, they sustained a really big injury, an illness, something like that. And it's, do you want to reach out in a sympathetic way or a congratulatory way, and what that boundary is? And I think, like you said, doing that inner work and having that boundary set with yourself is like super, super important. And then the other way, if they reach out, how do you want to respond? Which I think we don't think about enough, because that definitely happens.
Oof. Yes. So I'm going to go first to your first point about like when you want to reach out, because I also think depending on the way in which a friendship breaks up, it causes different levels, right, of how you respond to things, right? Because I do believe, like, right, what you fought over 20 years ago may not matter as much, but when you're looking at a memory. But one of the very closest people to me growing up, we had a major falling out, and about a few years ago, her brother passed away, and I was really just torn. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know if to reach out, because I didn't want it to seem like I was using this terrible thing that is happening to her as any way to be manipulative or to cause her any more pain. But I didn't want her to also, if I didn't reach out, think that I didn't give a crap. And so, like, how do I align with my values? And I really struggled with that, to find a place. And for me, I try to really not only think about my peace, but also kind of the peace that, like, disrupting somebody else's peace.
Yeah.
I think that's part of that like external self-awareness, and just because it would feel good for me to say that I reached out to her, like doesn't mean it was the right thing for her. And I think like, that's really important too. As we grow up, we realize that like, it's bigger than just what we need or what we need, like I think that you then would have to find a different way to be okay with yourself. I ended up like donating anonymously, and because I wasn't sure the impact that my reaching out would give her.
Absolutely.
And so again, like she doesn't know that, and so I can't help what she, like what she feels or how she feels. But again, and I do when we're having conversations like this, like I don't know, I made the right call. I mean, you know what I mean? Unless you have that other person there to tell you what the right or the wrong thing was to do. But trying to find a way. As opposed to like drifting apart, I feel like maybe the door is still open. It might be an awkward door, but it's like, I think there's like less nuance to that.
Great leaders aren't born, they're made. So who made you a great leader? If you're like most of us, you're trying to figure it out along the way. And you may be wondering if you're doing it right. Well, wonder no more. Cabana has worked with globally recognized coaches and tenured health system leaders to create the Balanced Leader Program, a one-on-one coaching program tailored for busy workers just like you. Learn more at www.mycabana.health/coaching.
Yeah, definitely. I think what you bring up is so important as well. Like that self-awareness, like just because I'm ready to reach out to them or ready to whatever it is involving them in our friendship doesn't mean they're ready either. Like I know there've been times when I've seen like an old friend's text, like name come across my phone and I get that feeling. I'm like, whoa, like it could just be as simple as like checking in, like, hey, what's up? Or, you never know what it is. And I think it's, using that little piece of like empathy and self-awareness. Like if I reach out to them, what is this going to cause with them internally and them emotionally? And even, because you have separated, you're not always aware of their emotional state or what's going on in their environment. So it's also like putting yourself, like kind of hitting that pause button, like, okay, I don't know what they're going through right now. And if they are going through like an emotional time, is this really the time to reach out? And also like, are you ready? I think a lot of the times like people jump the gun and just send that like, hey, how are you text, not thinking that it's anything more like, hey, just checking in or a memory or a photo or whatever it is. Not realizing like, is this opening up the door? Am I ready? Are they ready? It is a two-way street.
And opening up that door, right? Like when you reach out, it does open up that door. And if your only thing is to just share that memory, like
right,
maybe not including them. Because if you're, you're kind of starting a cycle all over again in which, hurting yourself or the other person. And then I think you brought up something I wasn't even thinking about, but I think you're 100% on the money with this whole what to do when you're someone like,
from on the receiving end.
Yeah, you're on the
Someone
receiving end.
to you. Yeah.
You're right. I don't think we prep for that. Like, we prep for the other one because it's in our control. But like, what do you do when you receive that and it does like screw your day?
Yeah.
We think about it with like an ex-boyfriend, right? Or ex-girlfriend. We're like so easy to be like, that throws my whole day off. But
right.
I know there's a few people that if their name came across my screen, it would rock my world.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think it's normal to like kind of know your response with like an ex in a way, because you kind of are more, I would say, firm in where you stand. Like you kind of know like, okay, I'm going to respond or I'm not. But I think it's that friendship. It's so weird. Like it was good, but then it wasn't. And those times where it just was that slow drift away and nothing happened. It's like, well, do we try this again? Do we try and be friends again? And I don't really think there's anything that can prepare you, because I also think that when an ex reaches out, there's typically something going on. They've seen a post, there's a memory, there's a reminder. This time of year we were doing this or that. But I think a friend is so much more random, just because that's just, I feel like, how it is. So it's also like nothing is preparing you for that memory, that text, that email, that friend request, even like a LinkedIn thing.
Oh
like,
my God.
Like we don't even think about that.
That is so true. When you see certain people come, like, why do when I see certain people come on, and I love that you said LinkedIn, because 100% in this age of social media, it's like, well, I'm not going to be the one that first Instagram friend request you, but I sure as hell will like casually drop into the like your LinkedIn friend request. And then, you know, I know for me, when some of those friend requests have come in, I felt like, oh, so you're friend requesting me because you want this information, but you don't want to do the hard work of talking to me or like investing your time in me. You want to passively consume my life. Like, and that's probably dramatic and everything else. But again, these like very small things that happen with so much access to with social media.
Yes. And I think I want to call out another weird thing that I know we kind of talked about big friend groups, but something else that I think we don't acknowledge enough is if you are in that big friend group or even a smaller friend group, and say you were part of a trio or a little quad group, and two of them like remain really close and you remain close with one of them, and then you have that awkward dynamic of, oh, I used to be best friends with both of them, but now I'm only friends with one, and you see the one is friends with both, so they're still posting this other person, and it's just like that weird thing of like, okay, if they're still friends with them, why am I not? Like that self-doubt. And I think it's like, unfortunately, in that moment, I know I struggle with looking at what was wrong with myself in that friendship and not the other person, which I think like it's very hard to do, to look at that other person and pull them apart and see like, okay, maybe it wasn't me. I just think it's always easier for myself. And I'm sure you as well. You've talked about, you know, being that glue, being that person that always reaches out, like looking at how maybe it wasn't you and it was them. Like, I'm sure there's fault on both ends in most places, but I think that's really hard. And that's something I definitely struggle with, like seeing other people remain friends and me not be there and wondering like, what could I have done? What did I do?
Or why wasn't I enough to like invest? Like why they're so willing to invest in this relationship, but like everyone was so willing to let me go. And that was the reason you guys are even friends. I mean, I have a similar like trio group where, like I just, again, like it was very difficult to like watch all these things. One, knowing that like I was the reason they were friends, knowing all the history we had, and then also knowing like, you know, you guys make these efforts all the time, yet.
And I think like
enough for that. And I mean, one of the things I say often is, again, because when you confront people, a lot of times if this was just a dynamic and the role you played, they're not going to see. They're going to be like, well, you should have spoken up. Well, when? In the third grade we're talking about?
Right.
And so I know for me, like I had to start realizing that like not every friendship will have like a nice bow on it. And that I'm going to have to give closure to myself in a lot of these situations. And release and let go things that, and people that, no longer, you know, like you said, align to, you know, who I am, who I want to be. Yeah, you're right. Like there was this version of me that gave and gave and gave because I had not done any internal work. So all my validation was external. And so like, that's the purpose it served at the time. But that's not who I am anymore.
Right. Absolutely. And I think that also goes back to like, just because we were friends doesn't mean we have to remain friends. And I know that's like really, really hard. And I know that sometimes that goes against like, I'm a very, very loyal person. So sometimes it's hard for me to be like, well, we were friends and we have all this history and I can't do that. But at the end of the day, like you should be loyal to yourself and your own, like what's serving you. And if you don't want to be that person, like you're not the same person you were when you formed that friendship in elementary school or middle, even college, even maybe a year ago.
100%.
Like life throws things at you and you grow. And I think when you start realizing the people that are showing up for you in the way you want them to and the way you show up for them is when you're like, okay, I don't need 18 friends. I need 8 really close ones that I can count on.
No, 100%. I completely agree. And I think that goes to like kind of where we were just talking about like when this breakup happens, but what happens when like you need to actively break up with someone? I can say, personally, I've not been very good, as I told you guys, at like things like that. Cause I feel very bad. I feel like there's a lot of guilt associated with that.
Yeah, definitely.
Like, you know, every friendship is different and it requires different amount of like investment and energy. And, you know, sometimes you can't give the demands of a friendship, or sometimes it's like, you know, no longer serving you because you're not in that era of your life anymore. So I think that's really hard too, right? To know when to prioritize yourself. and to say like, you know what, I can't, like this friendship needs to either drift away or like slowly fizzle. Or, you know, I have to like put a hard boundary up.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think that's ever kind of like easy.
No. And I think, you know, in relationships, it's easier in a way because you have like more of a concrete reason. Like you're not necessarily drifting apart in relationships the same way you are friendships. So it's like,
there's no slow fade on that. I mean, maybe, but like, it's not like once that kind of like, we're broken up, we're broken up.
yes. And it's like that friendship that we texted every day, life happened, we're texting once a week, a couple times a week. And then it's like all of a sudden we're not texting at all. Like, does that mean the friendship's over? Like, what do I do with that information? And I think a lot of times, like you said, there's not going to be that closure. Unfortunately, it's just going to be that fade out. And a question like I kind of want to ask you as a therapist and you being a little bit older and a role model.
All right, Biz, we'd have to throw the old comment in. I love
like, why are we so okay with like other, like, I mean, a big term is like class friends, those friends you had in class or those friends you had in situations like, oh, they were a soccer mom with me. And then the season was done and we were okay, like not seeing each other, or that school year ended and we're fine. Like, why are we so fine with those friendships? You guys could have been really close too. Why are we so okay with those friendships fading out as kind of like the season change? But other friendships, like, and I'm saying you could have had the same level almost of friendship in a way, but like, why are we so okay with those fading out and ending and others not?
Good question. I think part of it comes from like attaching worth to and self-love and you know, status even in a way to certain identified like friend groups. And I don't think we do it consciously, right? Like I think that you know, I don't think of a single, when I'm talking about all these friendships, I'm talking about all my elementary, like friends I've had since elementary school. Like, I don't even think of, I have no emotional weight to any of my college friends. I love them to death, but like those fading out have like zero to no impact on me as these other friends. And I've seen clients who have the reverse, right? Like no one really from their hometown, but you know, something happens in their college friend group and they really fall apart. And so I think it's about like how you attach your identity to these friend groups. And then again, like applying your values, like you said, you're really loyal. So what does it mean? Am I not really loyal if I like don't give this, you know, or if I don't consistently show up, you know? And I think also one thing we have to do a better job of, in my opinion, is realizing that who are my, like, when good, better, and different, who am I calling? Like, who's my overall, I don't want to say best friend. I think it's overused, right? Who's my person,
Yes.
right? And then I think you could have different friends for different areas and parts of you. And I think that's one of the things
Definitely.
that you can't do in a relationship that you can do in a friendship, right? So
Yeah.
if you really like, you know, getting your nails done and going to the mall and, you know, you have a friend that's like really enjoys that too. Yeah, you might not like maybe get drunk on a Friday night with her, or, you know, maybe you spend a lot of that time listening about her relationship stuff, but like you do those things together, right? And that's like the core of the friendship. And I think that speaks to like your seasons, right?
Yeah.
And no longer, and I think we have to start being okay, especially as adults, where it's like, you know, I have my friends who like when the Taylor Swift album drops, like that group of people that I reach out to because like it's our thing. We don't talk in between album drops. It's crazy, right? Like, we just don't. I don't think that means they love me or they don't love me. Or I don't attach any of that worth to that because it's just this kind of like thing that we have together. But you know,
Absolutely.
when you think of like college friends and work friends or all these groups, I think there's an attachment too, because they're big transitional periods in our lives, right? Like school age, you know, you grow up someone with that's history, college, again, transitional. And then depending on your work environment, if you happen to get like toxic work environments, trauma bonding, you know, or really being aligned and in love with a mission, you know, you see a lot of this too in like med school and law school, like really it like that feeling clinged to those like people you went through that with. And I think though it ends up being limiting because, you know, that's just a part, like a season, like you said.
Definitely. I think what you said about having friends for different things is so important. And I would agree with that 100%. Like I have my friends, like I'm a huge, huge Ravens fan. I have my friends that will come to the game with me no matter how much the tickets are. Like I have those friends, and then I have other friends who are like, yeah, I'll watch the game with you, but I'm not spending that on like Or I'll have friends that like, they really like to go on walks with me and hikes. And I have other friends who are like, we're hitting the bars. Like there are those people, but I would say like one common theme and how in a weird way I've started like measuring my friendships, but any of those people I could call in the middle of the night on the side of the road and be like, my car broke down. Like, can you come get me? Like any of those people, like that's a way I like to, if I can't call you in the middle of the night to help me with something, or you're not going to be there with like reaching out to me, like I just broke my leg, like my friends that are reaching out to me or dropping off a basket or being like, oh my gosh, you're still going to be included. We'll push you around a wheelchair. Like those people,
no matter what
exactly.
genre or like, they fit. And I think exactly, I think having higher standards for our friendships will also make breakups, as adults, I think, right? Like it will make it different, right? Like, cause then you're not going to see the drifting. You're not going to, and if you have a major blowout, you're going to come back to the table and like readdress it. But that comes from like that quality of ensuring that you know who you're allowing into your life.
Yeah.
And of course, I'm going to sound like a broken record, but of course you can't know who to involve in your life until you know truly internally, like what you need and what that internal landscape looks like. You said when you were talking about like the Ravens and game and all of that. I also think restructuring I think because best friends meant like you are at the hip all the time.
Yeah.
And, you weren't best friends if you didn't do absolutely everything together. And maybe that's just
no
millennial thing, but
I think that best friend almost has become almost a sort of toxic thing in a way. Like we are so, and like movies, TV shows, social media, it's like this person is my best friend. And if I'm not with them 23/6 of 24/7, like we're not best friends. And like measuring a friendship by the hours you spend with them, it doesn't mean that they have to be good hours. Like it's this weird obsession with putting this one person on a pedestal.
Yes. And I think too, I think that's where, when you look at what you were saying about those different types of friends, it's like, we try to make somebody, and I was always the yes person. I was always good for a good time. So like I was okay going to everybody's concerts or this or that and, never complained or anything. But like, how many people came to a Taylor Swift show with me?
Right.
And so, stop trying to make one person be everything in terms of a friendship, right? Some people are, I learned this when I got sick. Some people aren't going to be able to show up for you the way you need them to. And that doesn't mean there's anything like wrong with it. It was just, it's just that they can't, their own limitations. And, so when I'm feeling good, I can choose how I want to move forward with that.
Right. And I have a question, I guess, another question for you. So you have this person and they're not showing up for you, but you kind of know that they can, but you're just not sure how to communicate how you need them to show up for you. But you want to. How would you go about, it's not a friendship that's like phased out. It's an active friendship, but they're just not showing up the way that you need them in the moment. How would you communicate that to them?
Well, I'd first make sure that I wasn't expecting them to mind read. Have I actually ever stated to them the way that I need them to show up?
Good point.
So, for instance, that friend you call when you're really like hysterical and you do not need them to give you a solution. You need them to just listen and be like, F him, F that, F work, because that's what you need in that moment.
Right.
And they're over here and you're feeling unheard because they're just like, take a deep breath. I think they had positive intentions. And you're like, oh my God, like I'm here every time you want to talk about someone's, incredulous Facebook post and I listen, right? So again, did you tell them what you needed either right in the beginning or as like an overall concept? I think starting small is easy. So, a lot of times I'll preface and I'll be like, hey, Biz, I'm really upset right now and I need you to just listen and vent. I'm sure that there's a more rational like solution, but I not right now need you to be in this moment that like we're riding at dawn. We're like, Game of Thronesing. And that kind of sets the tone and that makes it a lot easier to, because then if they still are doing it, then like you kind of have an answer about like whether or not.
Right. It's worth.
The effort. And then I would say like overall, what really identifying first what showing up means for you and taking off sometimes we miss what showing up means for other people because that's not showing up for in our definition. And so it's
Yeah.
like we expect our friends at times to, well, I brought you a Christmas gift. I thought about you when I was on vacation and I got you a souvenir. You know what I mean? And we then measure how much they care or show up for us based on, when they go away, they are so immersed with their families, they never like return a text or they never get us a souvenir. I mean, stupid example, but
Right. No, good example. I think that's a very valid thing. Like I think about you when I'm on vacation, I bring you back a shot glass or a magnet or a t-shirt, whatever it is, and you don't do the same. But that's not how it doesn't mean anything for you, but it means something for me.
Exactly. Right. And so, and then I think like doing that, like almost like a checklist, like, okay, so however, right. Like she writes me, I am like every Monday morning, I have like an affirmation, whatever. Like what, is there a way that she's showing up in which like I can then like see that that's like her way of showing up? And that might not be enough. I'm not saying it is or it isn't, but I think just having a clear assessment of like what the true like root of the problem is. And is it
Definitely.
also, because I think sometimes we get a little bit lost in, wanting to feel validated in the friendship or wanting to feel just like any relationship, right? Like loved and important to someone. And how we show that, can vary in different ways. I think one of the really important things is on the receiving end of that, like asking your friends, like, how can I show up for you? Like, busy, you broke your leg. How can I show up for you? What can I do to, like, I can't change that you broke your leg. I can't change any of that, but how can I show up for you? What do you need in this moment? Like that I can, and I think just that kind of question is really good to ask. Like if you don't know how to show up for someone or you feel like that you don't have words, it's the easiest thing you can do. And it's the most validating because it's so important that we, in friendships we're not trying to project or mind read, fortune tell. We're just like clear communication is really, really, important there. And then I think, right, it's about listening. I think when my sister, I think she's actually done a really good job of this, where I have said many times, like something bothers me. And recently she was making plans and she was like, I don't want to continue doing something that makes you feel this way. Would you like, so I don't want to continue prioritizing things over you or something. The way she worded just let me know that she heard me and like it was showing up for me differently. Now, mind you, I didn't really care. Like it didn't have any impact on me. So I was like, no, go to your thing. Like, don't worry. We'll do it another weekend. But by her saying that and like giving it back to me, like clearly showing that effort of like, okay, I see how you need me to show up for you. I see how your definition of prioritizing works. And while in her head, she always felt like she was prioritizing me because that's the way her brain was working. It wasn't translating. And so kind of, instead of being like defensive when something is brought to you, really trying to understand, is this almost just like a language problem? Like, do you define priority differently than I? I know I have a extremely high loyalty. Like my definition of loyalty is like, if it's cut off, it's like, you don't look, it's ridiculous. And I'm aware of that.
Right.
And knowing other people, like, but knowing that two-way street, like how I define it, I think is really helpful.
No, I think that's super helpful. I think you're right. Like the mind reading piece is huge just because, you think that about that, like it's so important. And especially like in this day and age, like a text, you could read it one way and they meant it a totally different way. Like, or just, they didn't know that this happened to you and you want them to bring you back a souvenir. Like that means a lot to you. And it could be a postcard, like it could be something so simple, but that little action to you means more than they could ever know. And I think it is just like voicing that or doing that internal checklist. Like, okay, I know I want A, B, C from a friend and I want them to show up X, Y, Z. Like that's what I'm looking for. Is this person doing that? And how can we get there if I want to
invest in that? Exactly.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. I think that's 100% correct. It comes down again, I think, to understanding yourself, because one of the things I remember when if someone was to ask me, how can I show up for you? I'm not sure I want to have an answer. I think that's a problem, right? Like, that means I would agree. 50% of the fucking problem. Sorry about that. That means I'm 50% of the problem, right? Because now I'm expecting you, someone outside of my body, to know what I would like you to do in this very moment to make me feel better about something that you have no control over. And so you're kind of like,
and I don't even know how I want you to show up.
exactly.
I don't know
even
what I want right now.
exactly. And so I think being honest with yourself about like, that doesn't mean that your feeling is invalid, right? Like it's probably a signal, like absolutely a signal to be like something in this friendship is not, fulfilling me or meeting my, expectations. But before I take action, I need to know what it is, so that I can clearly communicate that.
Yeah.
And that's like kind of your own personal thing that you have to go through.
And do you have any, I guess, like advice on how to do that internal self-reflection, like how to get there and be like, okay, I recognize in myself that I want these things out of a friend and show up in these ways? Like, do you have any tips for that?
So I think you can do, first of all, I think it's about figuring out, to your point about like large group, small group, is like what kind of friend I am, so that you can assess like your circle of friends in terms of like what layer, right? Is it going to be the core group? Is it going to be, the mid tier, or just like, the acquaintance layer, right? Because each one of those layers are going to have different energy that you bring to it. And so I think knowing the type of friend you are is really important, because then you have like kind of a template of like, essentially we often think that, right? Like everyone thinks the way we do, right? Like it's just, and so if you know the type of friend you are, you at least have it listed, things that like could be potentially important to you. And then you can kind of be like, okay, well, when I'm angry, what do I usually need? Do I need do I need someone to listen and feel heard, or do I need a solution, right? And at different times, different ways, but kind of like make yourself a little flow chart to understand like, how you work internally. And I would say just ask yourself the question of like, what do I need? What soothes me? What am I looking for? Right? What's my objective when I reach out to my friend, right? If I reach out to my friend and I have really good news and she acts very flatlined about something, my objective there, right, was someone to share the excitement with. And so who I reach out to, right, I should pick my friend that I'm going to reach out to appropriately. Definitely. I think some people just aren't like, going to find exciting news. Like they're just, it's the person, right? That's the person not present, and they're just like, they really like it, but they're excited. That's not how they emote.
Right. That's just not that person. And I think that you're like back to when you said like the seasons of life and the people, like, you have your people for certain things. Exactly. You have your people. I'm going to share this great piece of news with this person because they'll give me the response I'm looking for. This person, like, I'll still tell them, but I shouldn't look for that enthusiasm in.
Exactly. So I think, right, it's like if you're just telling someone and you're just sharing, like knowing what your objective is or what you're trying to get out of it is really important. And I think, again, the more work you do on yourself, the easier it is to like figure out what you want externally. Why do I get souvenirs when I'm away for my friends, right? It's because something triggers that I'm thinking about them. And that's why I like giving gifts. It's really not about the gifts for me. It's like, I like people to know that like wherever I am in my world, right? Like that something made me think of them, and so how can I, but that's how I like to give out, right? I'm not sure though that it means the same for me coming in, and so figuring out that like, I'm not sure it would matter to me if you went away and you didn't get it for me, but for me, it's one of the ways I show it. So like, is it something I give and need to receive, or is it something, I think for me more so it would be like, I'm someone who will always pick up the phone and you can vent and I will like listen to and, go all in on that loyalty.
Yeah.
But then if I call and like, I'm bitching about, a post, I really want you to kind of like touch fest with me a little bit, exactly, like know that I'm being irrational 100%, but like join in on.
And I think that's like hard because sometimes like I'm always that person, like I'll be so excited for you. And I assume because you see the way I'm reacting, you will pick up that you need to react that way to me. And again, I think it's like that assumption in that mind reading that they are so involved in my text that they can tell every time they share a good piece of news, I'm always using all caps, exclamation points, like I'm assuming they recognize that and they don't do the same in return. Like that's just total my reading, total assumption. Like that's not how it works.
Well, right. And because what we think is so obvious usually is like not so obvious. Like they could just I mean, if you look at anything I text, people are like, yeah, she just slams her hands on the keyboard. Facts.
Yeah.
But you know what I'm saying? Like, I feel like, and also when you're judging, I think we're also hard on ourselves with internal narratives, and, you know, negative self-talk, that sometimes it's like, oh, we want to kind of like make an excuse or, well, Busy did that because like of this, like, but don't have to do that because, you know, I'm busy. I have kids. I have, you know, like we try to rationalize things that I think that don't align with our values or who we want to be as friends and stuff. And so that can definitely, I think also being honest with yourself and being like, you know what, if you've been a shitty friend, go ahead and like text that person, like, hey, I've been a really shitty friend. I'm sorry. I haven't had a lot of extra energy to invest in people, but I want you to know that like, no matter what, I'm here for you. Like that's
right.
You know, like there's no shame in saying that. And for me,
100%. I'd much rather have a friend be like, hey, I'm so sorry, I messed up, rather than just like ignoring my text because they can't respond. Like,
yeah,
they could just say, hey, I'm sorry, I'll talk to you tomorrow. Like, I have way too much stuff going on today. Like, I would so much rather have somebody be over communicative than that blank text that like, hey, like, what's going on? Or that not returned phone call, or, you know, or especially if I'm like asking questions and they can't answer them that day. Like, that's fine. Let me know.
100%. And I think that's what, you know, it comes down to with these friendship breakups is like when you're evaluating and you're kind of going through the reflection part, like we do with everything in our lives, you know, what did I bring to this friendship that caused its breakdown? Where could I have been more clear about my wants, my needs, things that were important to me? Where could I have shared the burden of, planning, reaching out so that it was a mutual thing and it didn't all fall on me? But then also giving the appropriate amount of like, this person could have done something different too. And making sure that, you know, we're not just taking that rumination of like, oh, we made a mistake. I did this, and really beating ourselves up about it, but making sure that when we enter the next time the opportunity comes to reset expectations with any friend group or a new friend, we have a better starting point than the last.
Yeah, great point. Yeah. That's awesome.
I'll get that. We'll be back next week with a brand new episode of You're Always Fine. Until then, mind your health.
Seriously, you're fine. You're fine because you have the power to access your place of peace anytime you need it. However, if you get stuck, we're right at the palm of your hand to help. Check out our show notes for this week's source list, recommended content, and Cabana live group schedule. We'll catch you next week for a brand new episode of You're Always Fine.
The team at Cabana has found your reset button. The answer? Cabana Pods. Acoustic, soundproof booths with immersive micro vacations proven to boost your mood in just 5 minutes. To learn more about Cabana Pods, visit www.evenhealth.com/pods.